Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a Sunday ChinWag with me, Richard Vobes, on the 28th of August 2022. You're very, very welcome. Today I want to talk about television. Are you somebody who watches television? Now, of course, got to define what you mean by television. Everybody, I say everybody in inverted commas, I know that's a sweeping statement, but most people have some form of flat screen in which they will put all sorts of content onto to watch. Whether that flat screen is a mobile phone, such as this, which I just quickly need to put on silent in case it pings, or a tablet, or indeed a large flat screen in the living room type thing. And so to define television, I'm referring to the more traditional type of what we know as television, if you like. I was going to say then the non-digital stuff, but of course television is all digital anyway these days. But I'm talking about, and when I say terrestrial television, of course, or old-fashioned type of terrestrial television, I'm not just talking about, say, in this country, you may be watching in a different country, of course, the BBC, but I'm talking about the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, but, and if you're watching in other countries, they may be, I don't know, cable television, they may be satellite television. We have Sky TV here, and of course then there's the newer kids on the block, things such as Netflix. Do you watch that sort of stuff? I would then define other stuff that you might watch on the television, such as YouTube and the various other streaming platforms that are out there. I'm discounting them from what I call television. I'm talking about things that are made by larger organisations who have thousands of pounds to put together a television type of programme, not individuals like myself and the millions of others who put together their own little channels, and some of them reaching huge audiences, far greater than television does, and those like myself who have a very tiny little audience, but great expectations, thank you, Charles Dickens, to increase that audience over time. So I'm not talking about us and those wee little people. I'm talking about the big organisations who have people on the payroll, you know, the sort of thing. So, do you watch television? Now, I used to watch television as a kid. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and absolutely enjoyed the output from all of the stations and fondly have memories of some of the programs that I used to enjoy. Things like Thunderbirds, of course, the Jerry Anderson output. Even silly little things like Hammy Hamster's Adventures on the Riverbank, or it might have been known as Tales on the Riverbank, to the Magic Roundabout, to things like The Professionals, The Sweeney, Minder, and then, of course, many of the lovely American output that we had at that time, the A-Team, of course, $6 Million Man, The Invisible Man, all those sort of Mission Impossible, all of that kind of stuff. Yes, loved it. Television, to me, at its most interesting and unique, and in that sort of hiatus of development of television. Now, I don't know, I don't watch television. About 3 or 4 years ago, I decided, I just found that I wasn't watching television at all. And in the end, I realised what was the point of paying £150 a year for a licence for something that I effectively was just not watching. There were very few programmes that I enjoyed. One of the complaints that I had with television, and it is also a complaint with YouTube, but YouTube works on this principle, I suppose, is that a lot of the stuff was the same. So to give you an example, things like these cooking programs in which a competition of people would get together and be in a competition to cook a certain type of dish, and we would become emotionally involved with these people who we knew nothing before about. Perhaps they were celebrities, we would know about them, but also people who you'd have no idea. And you get a bit of a backstory, and then they're cooking some rather luscious-looking dish in either a time frame or with limited ingredients, whatever the competition rules were. And as a friend of mine used to call it, it was food porn, because you'd have this sumptuous meal that's being prepared and filmed from every different angle with a very soothing but patronising voiceover telling us about all the different ingredients and the background of the story. John is cooking a lovely onion in vinegar. It will be presented in a lime juice with a plate made from gold. And it was just total nonsense, really. Anyway, so I would be there with my friend at the time and watch this stuff and go, oh, that's interesting, nice. Then the next week it was the same thing, just 4 other contestants doing exactly the same. And I got pretty bored fairly quickly, but my friend was saying, oh, no, it's I love it, look at that. And I said, but it's pretty much the same as last week. We also watched this program about hoarding, in which some poor sap has a condition, and for reasons that I don't understand, but the doctors do, this person would be mostly living alone with their houses full to the brim of junk, stuff they've collected, including newspapers and paper bags, just in case it came useful. And they would live in the tiniest element of the house, having to go through what looked like a maze of narrow passages of store-high rubbish. And it was fascinating. The first episode, absolutely fascinating. What induced someone to be like that? And it seemed very sad that people got themselves into that situation, that whatever the mental condition is. And yes, I have a lot of sympathy with those sort of people. Then this program came up the following week, and my friend said, "Do you fancy watching this thing?" And I said, "What's it about?" They said, "It's about somebody, another one who hoards all this stuff." I said, "Didn't we see that last week?" No, this is a different person. And what happens in it? Well, I watched about 10 minutes of it and realised it was about somebody who had their house stacked up with all this stuff. And it was basically the same program regurgitated, and it was just a different person. And I gather that people like that sort of thing. And so this whole series was based on people storing things. And I thought, well, it's a one program idea that has been expanded into a series of, 12 or 24 episodes of basically the same thing. Unlike a series or a drama series or a serial in which there are new elements to it, nothing very much happened. I suppose if you were to follow this first person and find out what had happened to them, how they had been cured from it, it perhaps would have been a lot more interesting, because there would have been progression in the program, introducing possibly other people who also have it. But just basically, to me, lazy television, saying, well, we'll find 12 people who have stuff in their houses and we'll just expose them, and that's it. To me, that's very lazy television. I want to follow what happens to this person, how you go from being that and curing it, and how within those programs I'd like to have known how they started and how it happened, what happened to their life, their family and all of that. Now, that may have happened. You may have found each individual telling you the same story. I started to collect all this stuff and I started to fill up all the rooms, and in the end, my wife and children had had enough and they left me. And then I'd like to, and that maybe each one of them said exactly the same. And to me, that's where it becomes very lazy television. So I got a bit bored with television being this thing. But also, I also became aware that television and news channels, documentaries, the whole edit of these programs, the whole slant was telling me how I should think, the adverts that were coming up for a country like Britain, or countries, the conglomerate of the UK, this great nation, Britain, which I think has something like 3 or 4% of a certain race population, being overrepresented in adverts, and people like me, a white person, male, not represented at all in the adverts. In fact, I'd been wiped out from the adverts. It seemed to me that any person who I would ordinarily possibly have married or been going out with had been weren't going out with me or a representative of me. They were going out with someone from a different nationality, possibly on other sides of the world, and saying that those people were in fact everywhere. And I started to not that I've got anything whatsoever against those people, but I just found that the representation of it was a bit skewed, as it seems to be even more skewed in all the television programs. And people of certain sexual persuasion, which really should have nothing to do with the programs that I'm watching, things like science fiction programs, one of which started in 1963, I think it's the longest running program, in which the main character is replaced through, the actor is replaced through some weird transmutation, I don't know how to do it, and has a different sidekick going into their telephone box that's used for a particular emergency service. You know the program I'm trying to say without actually naming it. And I gather that the most recent incarnation of this character, in order to fit a certain diversity criteria, it seems to me, will be somebody from a very minority sexual area of the thing. I'm trying to tread very carefully without saying things that YouTube itself will go, oh, you can't say that, or indeed that the audience will go, oh, you're being whatever, and people like to call names. So I'm just trying to tread round the subject, but you know what I'm talking about. And I don't think it represents the general public most of the time. And I feel that a lot of television is thrusting these ideas that we are supposed to embrace. And I've got no problem with any of these people. I just don't want it to be skewed in their representation for the rest of the world. In as much as, where are the people like me? You don't see them. But I don't watch television anymore. In the end, I realised also not only was it doing my thinking, but it was taking away too much of my time. It was a bit like when I got into, in the early days when I had a computer back in, 97, 98, I suppose, when you first got, 1998 I'm talking about, not 1998. And you would get a computer, and I had something that had, I think, 500 meg as its hard drive or its capability or its onboard, whatever it was. And it was what was it? Not an Amiga, the other one, Atari. 500 meg, as I seem to remember, and you started to play these games on it. And then I got my first PC, Windows PC, with the 752,000 discs that you had to plug, you plug in just to get the operating software on, and then find that 62 of these that something failed, and you had to start all over again. We all remember those days. And then you would start to play. I played some games, and I realised that these games were taking up so much of my time that I had other things I wanted to do, and I would be doing this shoot-'em-up stuff, and hours would pass, and I thought, no, this is ridiculous. These are very addictive, and also that taking up too much of my time, and I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't doing. And I decided, you know what? It's either I can't play these games because I know I'll want to just continue playing with them, it's a bit like smoking in a way, the way I feel about it. You may completely disagree, in as much as, you either smoke and then you can't just have one, can you? You end up having several a day, and it's bad for you. So it's better not to have the smoking at all, or indeed, in my case, and I'm not condoning it for anybody else, or condemning it rather for anybody else, I just decided I wouldn't play any games, and I don't. It's not something that I want to do for hours and hours and hours, and many people do, of course, and they're entitled. It's their life. I'm not criticising or whatever, but I found too much time was disappearing. Same with television. I found that now there was too many things, and particularly worrying for me is children watching television, because in my day we had 2 hours of children's television when you got back from school, from 4 till 6, or from something like 4:15 to 5:45, so not even 2 hours. And there was baby programs, and then there was your sort of 12-year-old 10 to 12 little drama, whatever it was. Things like I'm just trying to remember some of those science fiction programs. Some people will give me a whole list of them. Now I'm trying to remember them. Anyway, there was all these sort of programs, and then it ended up with the Magic Roundabout and then the news. And Zebedee said, time for bed, and that was the sort of end of the kids' TV series. But now, of course, children's television is wall to wall, all over the blooming place. You just put it on, and there is every cartoon you ever want to watch for hours and hours. Excuse me. And I think it's worrying, because we used to do things. I mean, amazingly, back then, in the 70s, I think it was a Saturday morning, there was a program called Why Don't You Switch Off Your Television Set and Do Something More Interesting Instead? And it was actually promoting the fact that once this program had finished, watch this program, but then once that program finished, switch off your box as kids and get outside and do something, or do something with your hands, or do anything other than watch a screen. And it seems to me that it's incredible that we now have a society that are so dependent on screens that people are walking along, probably even watching me talk on a screen as they're walking, and avoiding lampposts, people, cars, bicycles, scooters, and little old ladies with their shopping, and probably not managing that terribly well. Who knows? So it's really weird. But television itself, do you watch television? Are you somebody who watches that? Or have you switched your viewing habits to watching the alternative? Because we talk about the mainstream media having a grip on people, but I'm not really convinced that the mainstream media have such a grip on people as they once did. That more people, particularly after this pandemic that we've had, in which the mainstream media had one story alone and nobody was able to have a different point of view, that people are gravitating much more. They may be watching far more than they ever watched before, I grant you that, which I think is quite sad, because I'm trying to resist watching too much when there's a plethora of content out there. But I think people are moving to things like YouTube and independent thoughts, independent voices. You may say, but they're in their little echo chamber, and that may be true, but I think people are always in a bit of an echo chamber, whatever. You select the books, for example, if you're an avid reader, that you enjoy. You don't select a series of books that you don't enjoy. You read newspapers that you prefer. You watch the television programs that you always wanted to, and those things that you didn't want to watch, you avoided anyway. So I think we're always been in. You live in a community that you prefer if you can help it. You have the friends and neighbours that you would rather have than those that you wouldn't have. For example, I live in a reasonably nice area, and as far as I'm aware, and I certainly don't associate with villains and drug addicts and miscreants. I may be a miscreant myself, I suppose, but I think we all live in a bit of an echo chamber. If you go down to the pub and you sit down there of an evening having a chat with your mates, you're generally having a chat with people who are like you, mostly. And it's comfortable to be like that. So I see no problem with people online doing a similar sort of thing, because why would you do differently? But I'm asking, have you veered away from television? And in fact, have you, like me, got rid of your, if you're in the UK and you have to pay a license, have you got rid of your television license? Or have you moved away from screens more than ever? Even things like YouTube and programs like this. I'd be fascinated to know. Let me know in the comments. That would be interesting, and thank you very much for that. Quick look at some of the comments then that we've had recently. As you know, I've been away and I'm now back, and we were talking about holidays. What type of holiday? Not where the resort, but the type of holidays. Tuscan Odyssey says, I live on a farmhouse with a pool in Tuscany. So enjoy days and weekends like you, but in a different country. Summer at the beach, visiting family in the UK and Mediterranean. Or an island holiday. That sounds very nice. Easter, a city break, and at Christmas, various health spas when I'm not relaxing at home by my pool. Well, I have to say, if you are lucky enough to have your own Tuscan holiday, a farmhouse in Tuscany, I mean, you basically probably don't need to go anywhere. But everybody likes something different, don't you? No matter how palatial your lifestyle is, we all want something a bit different just to balance our life up. David Lavender says, good morning, Richard. I haven't been able to get away for years, but I used to love renting a quiet West Country cottage with my dog in mid-autumn. Long walks in the cool, crisp air, exploring the countryside and local places of historical interest, followed by some great food and the odd tot of whiskey. That does sound very nice, actually. That's very much my sort of thing, sort of quiet, mellow, contemplative type of holiday, away from the hurly-burly and just letting the world around me envelop me. That's the sort of thing I like. Ingram Carr says, when on holiday, I enjoy exploring, learning, immersing in different cultures and trying out new things, usually away from tourist areas. I've tried traditional relaxation holidays, but can't sit still for 5 minutes. Well, I'm very much like you on that. We travel in our caravan quite a bit, and my favourite destination is the Outer Hebrides. I would like to go to the Outer Hebrides, actually. I've never been there. Thank you for that. Very much appreciate it. Dan Yelson says, this is about what type of holiday. He says, I prefer belly pork and holidaying in England. I preferred, he says, belly pork and holidaying in England before they both became fashionable. Is it fashionable to holiday in England these days? I've hired boats on the Broads and the Thames several times each and used to work as a summer assistant lock keeper on various Thames locks between Goring and Henley. What a fun job it was. Do you know, on the trip that we did, we were on the Thames and we met several very charming, very lovely lock keepers, some who lived on the lovely houses that they have. I couldn't think of a better job personally, and I spoke to one of them who lived in the house and he said it took him 20 years to get the job, because I can imagine anybody who's got that job doesn't want to relinquish it very easily, and it took him 20 years before he could get the job, and now he is the happiest man he's ever been, and I think that's brilliant. So well done you, Dan. What a lovely lifestyle that is. Shirley says, I like hot countries to visit, but my favourite so far was the Rocky Mountaineer through the Rockies. Oh, right. And a cruise to Alaska to see the glaciers and canoeing in Ketchikan in Alaska. That sounds very adventurous, you know, a real sort of get up and go out and do it type of venture. I like that. Kerry Baldwin says some of our best holidays was on a cruiser on the Norfolk Broads. In fact, the boat that is in the Bald Explorer videos coming up from tomorrow, which I am editing at this moment, well, not this moment now, because I'm very much enjoying talking to you, but will be today, getting ready for the first one tomorrow, was on a cruiser that was on the Norfolk Broads. So there you go, small world, isn't it? Pete would hire a kayak and I would equip myself with binoculars and a book and sit on the front of the boat and watch the wildlife while he was off kayaking. I've been on to the northern coast of France visiting World War II sites. I would like to go to Belgium and North France and visit the First World War sites. We went with the school, very lucky, even though I went to a pretty basic secondary comprehensive school in Sussex when I was in the 1970s. But one of the most memorable things that happened was going to Ypres in Belgium, to places during the First World War, the sites of major battles, Hill 60, I seem to remember, Passchendaele, to the incredibly sad but awe-inspiring sight of the cemetery there with the hundreds and if not thousands of graves, and then going into various trenches that were still in existence, which were acting as a museum, which brought home that war over 100 years ago, and the sights, the sounds, and the dreadful times that those poor soldiers had to go through, the like of which, hopefully, we'll never have to witness again, although there are terrible atrocities and difficulties going on in this world as we speak that often isn't being broadcast anywhere, and people are suffering. It's horrible to think that in a civilized world that we are in, these sort of things can still happen, and through greed a lot of the time, and the need for some people to try and have more power than anybody else. Mary Fennell says, for us, it is a trip away in our old motorhome around the UK. Mostly short trips now, as the cost of diesel and campsite fees means we can no longer go very far for very long. We like quiet places with nice walk nearby. Simples. Mary, it's absolutely the sort of thing, as you'll know if you've been watching the Bald Explorer channel, the sort of thing that the lovely Julia and I very much enjoy doing. Just getting away and trying to be as close to nature as we can. Dawn Talbot says, Richard, do you not relate to people who become overweight? Do you not relate to people who become overweight? You appear to not have been slim all your life. How did you become overweight? Was it a side effect of medication, as it is for some people? That's an interesting question. Do you not relate? Sorry, I was just struggling with the English there. Do you not relate? Yes, I know that people are overweight, and people are overweight for numerous reasons, and of course we all have an opinion on our own weight and what's good for us and what isn't good for us. And I suppose I'm quite forceful in a way, or I'm open, shall we say, to giving my opinion. People may be offended, of course, by my opinion, and I appreciate that. But then they don't have. They can shrug it off, hopefully. I mean, it's only an opinion. It isn't a law. It isn't a fact. It isn't anything like that. What I think is irrelevant to anybody else. It's purely what I think, and it shouldn't have any marked degree on what other people think. I'm not going around calling people names. I'm just saying this is what I think. In terms of, I have been heavier, but never massively overweight, never grossly overweight. I did go through, when I lost my eye, having a steroid, which I had to help soothe the process of the eye's healing thing and to take away the pain, which had a huge impact on my body. And anybody who watches, if you want to watch me being extremely almost unrecognizable with the weight that I was carrying, go and watch a video. If you put in Richard Vobes Exeter, as in Exeter in Devon, excuse the fact that I place Exeter in the wrong part of Devon, south or north, whichever part it is. People always comment, "Oh, Richard, you got that wrong." It's like, yeah, okay, slip of the tongue. But never mind all that. You'll see a very large, overweight, fat, let's be honest, looking bloke that I had not realised just how much I had ballooned up because the steroid had that effect. It was mostly water. It was mostly water that had just got under the skin and ballooned me up. And I got off those steroids as soon as I can. In fact, I didn't take the quantity the doctors had told me to take because I'm somebody who resists medicines, because I'd look at them as that, I would have the minimum amount of medication, the minimum, to sort out a problem. I rarely take paracetamol. I never take an aspirin. I rarely take those things because I think mostly the body, unless you're in a very serious situation like having your eye removed, mostly the body will actually cure itself if you give it the healthy foods that you do. But my issue with overweight is we're a civilized society, we're an educated society, we have knowledge, we are not thick. People aren't really thick in the sense, I mean, apart from a few people who have obviously mental, complete mental things not working. But on the whole, most people are not lacking in intelligence. It's just the choices they make on the foods, processed foods, foods that are actually not giving them the nutrition. It's nutrition-free food. What's the point of eating stuff that gives you no nutritional value whatsoever, that the body has got to somehow deal with and get it out, and the consequences of which are filling up the arteries, and putting fatty deposits onto the body that we didn't actually need to do. All my opinion about people who are overweight and have those problems, apart from those who are on specific medicines which are trying to cure something, like when I had my eye and I bloated out, that I soon got off because I just thought, this is ridiculous. It wasn't good for me. It was only good for me for a very short space of time, and then I had to wean myself off this evil stuff, even though it was, doing one thing, but it was also the side effects were awful. And I appreciate some people are on those things, but I'm somebody who is perhaps a bit unusual. I think for myself, I go and find out information about stuff. I don't just take what somebody else tells me as gospel. I want to take that apart and go, is it really necessary to have quite such a large dosage as I had of the steroid? And I found I didn't, in the end, need that. So when it comes to things like that, I am only thinking about, why put rubbish into our body that people do. And I understand people have reasons for that, and that's fine. And people have the choice to do that, and that's fine. As I say, it's only my thoughts, and my thoughts are insignificant to anybody else. You don't have to, just because I think something, don't think, oh, that's the way everybody must think. No, of course not. It's just my own thought. Everybody's entitled to their thought. This is, free speech. I'm entitled to express my thought and perhaps share the idea that somebody might go, do you know what? Actually, you've got a good opinion, or they might say, actually, your opinion is rubbish. You don't know my circumstances. I have reasons why I do what I do, and absolutely fine. I've got no problem with that. So I don't know if I've answered your question terribly well, Dawn, but I've done my best. Emily, now I can't pronounce your surname. Lemieux, is it? People, she says, are age number obsessed, and obsessed that they have to have a partner. That's crap, she says. One has to be a whole person for our own happiness. I'm not giving my freedom now, older, away to anyone. It is the only way to do some of your dreams. Otherwise, one will out our dreams on the back shelf for someone else. I get what you're saying, even if your English is not terribly lucid, shall we say. And that's not a criticism, it's just me struggling to read what you're saying. But I get what you mean. So in other words, you like to be single so that you can do the things that you want. And that's fine. Nobody's arguing with that. But some people, as you say, want to have a partner and want to do things and share their life with somebody else, because there's a certain joy in, for example, the lovely Julia and I went on a boating trip, as I've alluded to before, and there's a certain joy about sharing the sights and the sounds and saying, oh, look at that, there's a kingfisher. How beautiful is that kingfisher? And look over there, that cow just coming down into the water to sample some of the water. You know, you can experience it yourself, but you can also, but it depends on your partner. If you go with the wrong sort of person, of course, they may be totally against what you're saying. There's a kingfisher. I don't care. Well, that's the sort of time you don't want to be with that person. So I completely get that. It looks like, Emily, you have, oh my goodness. You have on the same, this is a curious thing that people do. I don't understand. Maybe you could answer this in the comments. Instead of just watching the video and then commenting, some people comment in separate boxes throughout the video many, many times. And Emily, this is one thing that you do. It is irritating to do that, because you just think, well, shove it all in one box and then I can get all your views rather than a whole load. But people are entitled to do what they like, so I'm not going to complain too much. Anyway, there we go. Thank you very much for all of that. I hope that you have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you for listening. Sorry, this has been a slightly longer version than normal, but I will hopefully contact you tomorrow. I will record another of these ChinWags on another subject. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.